3 days after I came home from the hospital with my daughter, my mother-in-law walked into my house without knocking, sat down at my kitchen table, and slid a manila envelope across to me. "Open it," she said. I was still in the clothes I'd slept in. I hadn't showered in 2 days. My daughter, 8 pounds 4 ounces, born with a full head of dark hair exactly like her father's, was asleep in the bassinet 6 feet away. I looked at the envelope and then I looked at my mother-in-law, and something in her expression told me I did not want to open it. Her face was too still, too prepared. I opened it anyway. Inside was a cashier's check for $4 million, and underneath it a single-page document, a legal agreement. My name was at the top, my signature line was at the bottom, and the terms in between were simple enough that even someone running on 2 hours of sleep could understand them. I would relinquish all parental rights to my daughter, remove myself from the marital home within 14 days, and agree to a no-contest divorce settlement. In exchange, I would receive the check. I read it twice. Then I looked up at her. "Where is my husband?" I asked. "He's not coming," she said. "He asked me to handle this." I want you to understand something about that moment. I had just given birth to his child. I had spent 31 hours in labor. I had a second-degree tear and stitches in places I won't describe. And I was sitting at my own kitchen table being handed a document that said, essentially, that I could be bought, that my daughter could be bought, that $4 million was what my mother-in-law thought we were worth. And the thing is, I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because it was so grotesque it had crossed some line into absurdity, and my exhausted postpartum brain didn't know how else to process it. "You need to leave," I said. She didn't move. "You should think very carefully before you say no to this." I said, "You need to leave my house." She laughed, but she left the envelope on the table. I sat there for a long time after that. My daughter made a small sound in her sleep, one of those involuntary newborn sounds that isn't quite a cry but is enough to make your whole body go on alert. I went to her. I picked her up and I held her and I stood in my kitchen with $4 million on the table and I thought, how long has this been coming? My name is Waverly. I'm 31 years old. I have a master's degree in financial forensics and for 6 years I worked as a senior analyst at a regional accounting firm, which means I spent my days finding the money people thought they'd hidden. I am very good at my job. I am patient and methodical, and I understand better than most people that financial trails don't lie. People lie, but numbers always tell the truth eventually. My husband's name is Beckett. We met at a conference in Charlotte 5 years ago. He was charming and funny, and he asked for my number in a way that was confident without being arrogant, and I thought, this one is different. He came from old money, the kind that didn't need to announce itself. His family had owned a regional real estate development company for 3 generations. Comfortable, established, not splashy. Or so I thought. We got married after 2 years. Small ceremony, which was my preference. His mother, everyone called her by her first name, Isolde, and she preferred it that way, attended the wedding and smiled through all of it and hugged me at the reception and said she was so happy to have a daughter. I believed her, or I believed a performance of it, which I suppose is the same thing when you want it to be. The first year of marriage was good. The second year was when I started to notice things, small things. Beckett would be on his phone late, but always in another room. He started traveling for work more often, 2 nights here, 3 nights there. He became vague about specifics. I asked questions and got answers that were technically correct but felt hollow. I know that feeling. I spend my professional life finding the gap between what people say and what the numbers confirm. I didn't push it. I was pregnant by then, sick every morning until noon, working full-time and trying to keep our household functioning while Beckett was increasingly absent. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself the stress of first-time parenthood was getting to both of us. I told myself a lot of things. Then I came home from a late appointment at my OB's office one afternoon, 32 weeks along, and there was a woman's jacket on our couch that wasn't mine, just sitting there. A camel-colored blazer with gold buttons. Very nice. I picked it up, and I stood in my living room with it in my hands, and I thought, very clearly, there it is. Beckett wasn't home. I put the jacket back exactly where I'd found it. I took photos of it on my phone. I went upstairs and I sat on the edge of our bed and I opened my laptop and I started doing what I do. I want to be clear about something. I didn't have a breakdown. I didn't cry, not right then. Something in me went very cold and very focused, the way it does at work when I find the first anomaly. And I know there are more. I started with what I had access to. Our joint accounts, the household expenses, anything in both our names. And I found irregularities almost immediately. Hotel charges in cities he'd traveled to, billed to a credit card I hadn't known about, a restaurant charge. Twice on dates he'd told me he was in meetings until 9. Flowers, not from me. A parking garage, 3 blocks from our house, accessed on afternoons when he'd told me he was working late at the office. It wasn't complicated. People who think they're hiding things rarely consider how much gets logged automatically, how many systems record their movements without them ever thinking about it. I wasn't doing anything that required special access. I was just looking. I documented everything. I saved files. I organized them in a folder on a personal drive that wasn't connected to any shared device. And then I closed my laptop and I went downstairs, and when Beckett came home that evening, I said nothing. I put dinner on the table and I watched him across from me, and I thought, I need more time. Not to decide what to do. I'd already decided. I needed more time to do it properly. Over the next 6 weeks before my daughter was born, I built a file. It was meticulous. Hotel records, credit card statements obtained legally, photographs, dates, a timeline. I also started looking at something else. The family company. Beckett had given me power of attorney over certain financial matters when I was pregnant, a standard precaution, he said, in case anything happened during the birth. It was a generous gesture. He meant it as such. He had no idea what I would use it for. See, the family company, 3 generations of Hartwell real estate and development, had been having a difficult few years. Property market shifts, a few bad bets on commercial development, some capital mismanagement. This much was visible to anyone paying attention. What wasn't visible, not without looking, was a pattern of interne transfers over the past 4 years that didn't match any legitimate business purpose I could identify. Money moving from operating accounts to holding accounts to entities I couldn't immediately trace. Not huge sums individually, but consistent, regular. The kind of thing that looks like housekeeping until you map it over time and realize the direction is always the same. I mapped it. I built a second file. And then my daughter was born, and for a little while I set everything aside because she was here and she was perfect and I was her mother and nothing else mattered. That lasted 3 days. After Isolde left my house with her cashier's check still on my table, I called my sister-in-law. Beckett's younger sister, Nessa, who had texted me a photo of flowers when the baby was born, and whom I had always liked, had always suspected was nothing like the rest of them. We weren't close. I hadn't allowed myself to get close to anyone in that family. But I trusted my read on her. I have good instincts about people. It's part of the job. Did you know? I asked her. There was a pause. Then she said, not until last week. I swear to you, I didn't know until last week. Waverly, I am so sorry. Who is she? Another pause. Her name is Daphne. It's been going on for about 2 years. She's the one who's been pushing him to do this. To end the marriage. His mother is. She stopped. His mother thinks she's better for the company. Better for the family image. I don't know. I don't understand any of it. Better for the family image. I wrote that down. I need a favor, I said. I need you to not tell anyone you talk to me. Can you do that? Yes, she said without hesitating. That mattered. I called an attorney that afternoon. Not a general practice attorney, a family law specialist who also had a background in complex asset litigation. I found her through a colleague who'd used her in a contentious divorce. Her name was Miss Ponafier, Ostrander, and when I sat down in her office the following morning with my 2 files printed and organized in labeled folders, she looked at me with an expression I'd seen before. The expression of someone recalibrating their expectations. You put this together yourself, she said, looking through the second file. It's what I do, I said. She looked up. How far does it go? I don't know yet, far enough that it concerns me. She was quiet for a moment. Then, we need to file first. Today if possible. Once I file, the automatic stay provisions kick in and no marital assets can be moved. File today, I said. We filed that afternoon. Beckett found out the following morning. Not from me, from his attorney, who called him at whatever hotel he was apparently now staying at with Daphne. I know because Nessa told me he called her in a panic, wanting to know if I'd said anything. According to Nessa, he sounded genuinely blindsided, genuinely surprised. I found that interesting. He had sent his mother to my kitchen table 3 days after the birth of our child with a cashier's check and a legal agreement. But he was surprised that I'd filed. What did he think was going to happen? The next several months were not easy. I'm not going to pretend they were. I was nursing a newborn on a disrupted schedule, handling the beginning stages of a contested divorce, working remotely to keep my income intact, and continuing to build my case file when my daughter slept. There were nights when I sat in the rocking chair in her room at 2 in the morning and I felt something close to despair. Not about him, I was past that. But about the shape of the life I was in. The fact that I had to be doing this at all. That this is who he was. That I had spent 3 years with a person who could send his mother to buy our child. But I kept going. Because I had a daughter, and she needed me to keep going. The financial investigation, once Miss Ostrander involved a forensic accounting firm to formalize what I'd already found, opened up considerably. The pattern of transfers I'd identified turned out to trace back to a shell company registered in Delaware, nominally owned by a third party but effectively controlled by Isolde. Over 4 years, approximately $2.3 million had been funneled out of Hartwell Real Estate and Development, money that belonged to the company, that affected its solvency, that had significant implications for tax filings and investor representations. Let me say that plainly, $2.3 million systematically removed from a family company, documented and traceable, with Isolde's fingerprints on it. My attorney contacted their attorney. I will not quote what was said in those conversations because they were privileged. What I can tell you is that Isolde's cashier's check for $4 million turned into a very different kind of negotiation very quickly. The divorce settlement, when it was finally reached 8 months after I filed, included the following: full physical and legal custody of my daughter, with Beckett having scheduled visitation. The marital home, which I subsequently sold, a financial settlement that accounted for the marital asset erosion caused by the undisclosed transfers, and a formal agreement in which Hartwell Real Estate and Development would cooperate with an independent audit and restore the diverted funds, in exchange for my attorney agreeing not to refer the matter to state financial regulators, a decision I made not out of mercy, but because my daughter will grow up knowing Beckett's name, and I didn't want her father in prison on her account. That last part was for her, not for him. Beckett and Daphne are together now, as far as I know. They're welcome to each other. I mean that neutrally. I have no feeling about it one way or the other. He is her father and he will always be her father. And I've made my peace with working in proximity to someone I no longer respect, for her sake. Isolde lost her operational role in the company as part of the restructuring that followed the audit. She didn't lose everything. The Hartwells are insulated enough that losing never looks the same for them as it does for everyone else. But she lost the control she'd spent decades building, and she lost it because she underestimated me. That particular loss, I will admit, gives me some satisfaction. There's something I think about sometimes. When Isolde sat across my kitchen table and slid that envelope toward me, she wasn't being cruel for the sake of it. She was being practical. She'd looked at me, exhausted, milk-stained, 3 days postpartum, and she'd done a calculation. She'd decided I was the kind of woman who could be bought out of her own life. She'd decided the number was $4 million. She was wrong about a lot of things. The thing about financial forensics is that it teaches you, above everything else, that power isn't what it looks like on the surface. Power is in the records. Power is in the paper trail. Power is in the question nobody thought to ask until someone who knows how to read numbers decides to start asking it. Isolde had 3 generations of family wealth and a company she controlled and a son she'd shaped in her image. I had a laptop, a maternity leave, and a very good memory for irregularities. I know which one of us had the real leverage. My daughter is 14 months old now. She has her father's dark hair and my stubborn disposition, and she is the single greatest thing that has ever happened to me. She doesn't know any of this. Someday she might ask, and I will answer her honestly, in the way that's appropriate for whatever age she is when she asks. I won't make her father a villain in the story I tell her. I won't do that to her. But I won't lie to her either. She deserves to know that her mother didn't have a price. We moved into a smaller place after the house sold, a house that is genuinely mine, in a neighborhood I chose, near a park where I take her every morning when the weather allows. I make good money. I am good at what I do. I have a daughter who reaches for me when she's tired and laughs at the dog across the street and falls asleep every night with her fingers wrapped around my thumb. I think about that kitchen table a lot less than you'd expect. What I think about instead is this: on the morning after I filed for divorce, before Beckett knew, before any of it began to unravel, I made myself a cup of coffee and I sat with my daughter in my arms, and the sun came through the kitchen window the way it does in early October, low and golden clean. And she looked up at me with that unfocused newborn gaze that isn't quite seeing you, but is somehow still completely present, and I thought, I've already won. Everything that comes after this is just paperwork. I was right. I keep coming back to the moment Isolde sat across from me and made her calculation. She looked at everything she could see: the exhaustion, the milk-stained shirt, the bassinet 6 feet away, and she decided she knew exactly what I was worth. That's the part that stays with me. Not the cruelty of it exactly, the certainty. She was so sure. What she missed was everything underneath the surface. And that's the thing about people who've held power for a long time. They start to believe that what they can see is all there is. They stop looking. They stopped asking questions years ago because they never had to ask them. That kind of blindness isn't born from stupidity. It's born from never once being wrong in a way that costs them anything. Until it does. I think about what it took to sit across that table and not react. To take the envelope, read every word, set it down, and ask where my husband was with a steady voice. I wasn't performing calm, I genuinely felt it, and for a long time afterward I didn't fully understand why. I think now it's because I had already been doing the hard work for months before she ever showed up. I hadn't waited for the crisis to decide who I was going to be in it. The preparation was the integrity. Every file I built, every record I documented, every decision I made to handle it through proper channels instead of through anger, that was the part that actually mattered. Not the outcome. The choices that led to it. There's something I want to say about the months between filing and settlement, because they're the part nobody talks about. They weren't triumphant. They were grinding and lonely, and there were nights I questioned every decision I'd made, including the ones I knew were right. Doing the right thing doesn't come with a running tally. You don't get points in real time for being methodical when you could be vindictive, for protecting your daughter's relationship with her father when it would have been so easy to poison it, for going through proper legal channels when shortcuts existed. You just do it, and you hope the ledger balances eventually. It did, not because the universe has a preference for fairness. I don't know that it does. But because the actions I took were grounded in something real, and real things tend to hold up under pressure in ways that reactive, emotional decisions don't. Isolde's plan fell apart not because karma found her. It fell apart because her plan had always depended on me not looking closely. And I look closely. It's what I do. My daughter doesn't know any of this yet. Someday she'll be old enough to understand that the world will sometimes try to price you. Assign you a number. Decide your value before you've had a chance to show what you actually carry. I want her to know that the answer to that isn't rage, and it isn't surrender. It's the quiet, sustained work of knowing yourself well enough that no one else's assessment of you gets the final word. That's what I hope she takes from whatever version of the story I eventually tell her. Not that her mother won. That her mother knew who she was when it mattered. Thought clearly under pressure, and didn't let anyone else write her ending. That's the whole thing really. That's all of it.